She didn't look up from her phone when she said it. "It builds character," Samantha muttered, tapping out a message with her perfectly manicured nails. I stood in the foyer, car keys dangling in her hand, and my small tote bag over my shoulder. "Excuse me?" I asked. She finally glanced up. "The bus. I know you asked if I could drop you at your appointment on Tuesday, but I think it's better this way. More independent." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. It never did. "Besides," she added, slipping her sunglasses onto her head, "my lease doesn't allow for extra miles. And honestly, it's kind of out of the way." Out of the way. That's what I'd become. Not a person, not family, just an extra errand, an extra seatbelt, a quiet inconvenience. I nodded slowly. "Of course," I said gently. "I wouldn't want to overstep." "Great," she said, already turning toward the garage. "And hey, don't forget your bus pass this time. They're strict downtown." I smiled small, then walked back upstairs to my room. I closed the door without sound. The house was quiet, always was, when it was just the two of us. My husband had passed 3 years ago. He was the bridge between us. When he was alive, Samantha treated me like a polite guest. Now I was more like a permanent fixture, something the house came with. I wasn't angry, not at first, just tired. Tired of being managed like clutter, tired of being told I did well for someone your age, tired of being spoken to like I was a distant obligation instead of the woman who cared for her father until his final breath. I sat down at the edge of the bed and stared at the tiny white card in my wallet. My next appointment was across town. I could take the bus. I had before, but something about her tone, "it builds character," cut deeper than usual. Samantha drove a silver SUV, sleek and new, always detailed, and always just out of reach. She often talked about it like a trophy. "I lease it," she'd say proudly, "because buying is just bad money sense these days." I listened. I always listened. Even when her tone dropped subtle suggestions like breadcrumbs that I was old-fashioned, that I didn't need to be anywhere fast, that I should be grateful for a spare room and leftover dinner. But I wasn't ungrateful. I was patient. Patient enough to recognize that respect doesn't always return to you in the moment, but sometimes, if you're wise, you can earn it back in silence. I did some research that night. Not emotional, just practical. I called a dealership the next morning, asked a few quiet questions. I found out Samantha's lease was ending in 31 days. "Funny timing," the rep said. "We've actually had an inquiry about that model." "Have you?" I said, voice even. "Yes," I said. "I'd like to make an offer." "Are you the current lessee?" "No," I replied. "But I'm familiar with the driver." The rep laughed lightly, not catching the meaning. I didn't explain. Some stories don't need punctuation, just delivery. I scheduled the paperwork, transferred funds, paid in full, no financing, no loan, and not a single word to Samantha. Not yet. Because it wasn't about revenge. It was about remembering who I was before her dismissive smile started making me question it. She thought I was harmless, thought I'd always sit quietly in the passenger seat or at the bus stop. What she didn't know, I once built a business from nothing, paid off my mortgage alone, watched a man I loved die slowly, and still kept the house running. I didn't need her car, but I wanted the principle. I wanted the keys to remind myself that I could still decide. And I knew in exactly 31 days I'd be waiting when she walked into the dealership ready to renew her lease. But the car, it would be mine. There's a kind of silence that doesn't just fill a room. It clings to you, follows you into your thoughts. It's the silence you carry when you've spent years choosing peace over pride. That's the silence I lived in for more than a decade after marrying Thomas. Samantha was 16 when we met. Sharp-tongued, fiercely independent, and deeply attached to her father in ways that made any woman feel like an intruder. I didn't try to replace her mother. I only tried to stand beside her. She didn't want me beside her. She wanted her version of life, untouched her father's attention, undivided her house, unaltered. And I understood that. I didn't push. I folded towels. I cooked dinners I wasn't thanked for. I drove her to rehearsals and parent meetings when Thomas had to work late. I paid for her college tours out of my savings, quietly, willingly. When Thomas fell sick, it was me who stayed in the hospital overnight. Me who managed medications bills and specialists. Samantha visited when she could, but it was always brief. Always with a furrowed brow and to let me know if anything major happens. When the major finally did happen, when I held his hand as he took his final breath, it was me who whispered goodbye into the stillness. And when Samantha cried at the funeral, I didn't interrupt her grief to remind her where I had been the whole time. After he passed, I sold the lake house we'd saved for, together, and moved into the back guest suite of Samantha's home. She didn't ask me to, but she didn't protest either. I thought maybe in time, the distance between us might shrink, that the shared loss might make room for connection. Instead, I became convenient. I watched her son when she had meetings. I folded laundry when the machine beeped. I ordered groceries when I noticed the fridge was low. I offered always. I never imposed. She thanked me at first. Then she just expected it. She made jokes with her friends about my quirky old-school ways, about my refusal to order Uber Eats or use her espresso machine. She still reads paper books, I heard her laugh once. It's adorable, really, like living with a time traveler. I didn't mind the teasing, not truly. I'd lived long enough to know some people hide discomfort in mockery, but that moment in the foyer with the car keys dangling in her hand and that dismissive smile, just take the bus, it didn't feel like teasing. It felt like erasure, like every sacrifice had expired, like I had expired. She forgot I used to drive across state lines to bring her sweaters during winter break. She forgot the night she came home drunk at 19, and I sat with her by the toilet until 4 a.m., so her father wouldn't find out. She forgot how I used to stay awake until I heard her car pull into the driveway, safely even after I'd gone to bed. She forgot all of it, because she was comfortable, and comfort when unchecked breeds cruelty. I don't think Samantha saw herself as cruel. I think she saw herself as modern, efficient, practical. To her, my presence was a utility, a warm body who kept the house humming without complaint. I didn't match her aesthetic. I didn't challenge her. I was forgettable. Until I wasn't. The truth is, I never wanted her car. It wasn't about leather seats or Bluetooth. I didn't care about the make, the model, or the price tag. I cared about the way she held it over me, the way she used access as power, the way she weaponized something as simple as a ride to remind me where she thought I belonged. I belonged, apparently, in a bus seat, but I'd sat quietly for too long. That day, after our exchange, I remembered something my mother once told me. There's strength in silence, but there's freedom in movement. And I realized I had stopped moving. I had parked myself in the shadow of a girl who had never learned how to love someone who didn't look like her. So I moved. Not with noise, not with drama. I moved with intent. The dealership was warm. The salesman was kind. When I handed him the check, he raised his eyebrows. Paid in full, he said. Most people finance these days. I smiled. I've lived a life where I paid for everything twice, once in money and once in dignity. I'd rather not do that anymore. He didn't understand. He didn't have to. The transaction took 20 minutes. The satisfaction lasted longer. On the ride home, I passed the bus stop I would have stood at that coming Tuesday. A woman stood there with her scarf tight around her neck, holding a paper bag against her chest. She looked cold, alone, overlooked. I rolled the window down as I passed just slightly and whispered to myself, "Not today." That was the moment I knew I wasn't buying a car. I was buying back my space. And when Samantha walked into that dealership next month to renew her lease and heard those words, "Sorry, ma'am, that vehicle's been sold," she wouldn't just lose her car. She'd lose the illusion of control. The dealership was humming with Saturday morning energy, bright lights, free coffee, and the sterile scent of new interiors. Samantha breezed through the front doors in heels that clicked like punctuation. She walked like someone used to getting things renewed, with a signature, not a conversation. "I'm here about my lease," she said cheerfully to the man at the reception desk, tossing her hair the way she did when she wanted attention to land softly. 2021, silver SUV. "I'm ready to extend, maybe even upgrade if the numbers look right." The man blinked, typed something into the system, and frowned just slightly. "Let me just check." "Oh, Actually, that vehicle's been removed from the lease program. What do you mean, removed? Her voice remained calm, but the pitch shifted. Just a little higher. He smiled in that apologetic dealership way. It's been purchased. Paid in full, actually. Just last week. There was a silence. What Samantha's laugh was sharp. That's not possible. I drive it. It's parked right outside. He hesitated. It was leased. As of today, it no longer is. You'll need to return the vehicle. We've already filed the change of ownership. Her smile faltered. Who bought it? He looked over her shoulder, then gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. I stepped forward, keys already in my hand. Samantha turned and froze. I watched her face contort, not just in confusion, but in something deeper. Recognition of what she wasn't sure yet. Power, maybe? Or consequence? Hello, Samantha, I said calmly. She blinked as if her eyes couldn't quite register the shape of what was happening. What are you doing here? I didn't answer right away. I turned to the clerk and held out the paperwork. I'm here to pick up the title. He nodded and walked away. Samantha stared at me. You bought the car? I met her eyes. Yes. She looked stunned. But why she wasn't asking how? She knew how. I had money, modest but carefully saved. She had always assumed I spent it on knickknacks and charity auctions. She never imagined I'd spend it on something that used to belong to her. I shrugged. It felt time. She blinked again. You don't even drive that much. That's true. So why this one? I held up the key slowly. Because you said I didn't belong in it. The words landed with more weight than volume. She flushed. I didn't say that. You said it builds character to take the bus, I replied, still gently. You said the lease didn't allow for extra stops. You made it clear I was an inconvenience. She looked away. People around us were beginning to notice. Salesmen, other customers. But no one interrupted. It was the kind of moment that makes people pretend to check their phones. I didn't mean it like that, she said, voice tight. I know I said. You meant it like you always do. Clean, efficient, unapologetic. She stepped closer. You bought it just to prove a point. I tilted my head. I bought it because I was tired of being asked to shrink. And because you forgot who I was before you learned how to forget me. She opened her mouth, closed it again. There was no defense, only echoes. The clerk returned with the title in a sleek white envelope. All set, Mrs. Parker, he said with a smile. I thanked him, turned back to Samantha. I'll have the car towed to my address later today. You'll need to empty it. She stood very still. I wasn't angry. I wasn't triumphant. I was finished. She exhaled slow and shaky. Do you hate me? She asked quietly. It was a strange question, childlike, vulnerable in a way I hadn't seen in her since she was 17 and trying to choose a college. No, I said. I just stopped letting you decide what I deserve. There was a pause. She nodded just once, then turned and walked out. No yelling, no tears, just silence. Back home, I waited. She returned that afternoon. Didn't knock, didn't say hello. She popped the trunk, started pulling out boxes, bags, receipts. Her movements were jerky, precise, controlled. I watched from the window. She never looked up. Then, just as she was about to leave, she paused. She walked back to the car, opened the glove box, and pulled something out. A photo of her father and me. From years ago, before the illness, before the cold distance. We were laughing, tangled up in a moment no one had posed for. She stared at it, then placed it gently on the passenger seat and walked away. I picked it up later, held it in my lap, noticed something written on the back in Samantha's handwriting. Not recent, but familiar. He says you make the house feel like it breathes. I hope I learn how to do that someday. She had been 19 when she wrote it. I'd forgotten she ever did. But she hadn't. Not entirely. That night, I took a quiet drive, just around the block, windows down, no music, no destination, just me, the road, the hum of possibility. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a passenger in my own story. The car sat in the driveway for 3 days before Samantha said anything. She walked past it every morning on the way to the gym, to her Pilates class, to her errands, but never acknowledged it. Not with a glance, not with a word, as if ignoring it would make it vanish. I didn't drive it, not yet. I didn't need to. Its presence was louder than anything I could say. It wasn't about possession, it was about presence. On the fourth morning, she poured 2 cups of coffee instead of 1, placed one in front of me at the table like she used to when Thomas was alive. No eye contact, no explanation. I took a sip. She did too. The silence between us wasn't cold, it was precise, like a chessboard with too many unfinished games. She was trying, but trying didn't mean surrender. She still carried herself like the queen of the house, back straight, tone even, but there was something different in her rhythm. She paused before speaking. She chose her words like someone picking glass out of a wound. "Evan's parent-teacher night is next Thursday," she said casually. "You're still coming, right?" I nodded. "Of course." She tapped her nail against the mug. "You can take your car if you want. I mean, we'll meet there anyway." I looked at her steady. "Thank you," I said. She blinked like she expected me to say more. I didn't. That was our new dynamic, carefully measured civility, with a trace of unease. Later that afternoon, I found Evan in the yard, building something out of sticks and bottle caps. "Mom said you stole her car," he said, not looking up. I smiled. Is that what she said? Well, kind of. She was mad, but not loud mad. More like when she talks with her mouth tight. I nodded. Sometimes grown-ups don't say what they mean when they feel embarrassed. He looked at me. "Why did you take it?" I crouched beside him. Because sometimes people need to remember that you don't have to raise your voice to make a point. He thought about that. "She's been quieter," he said, "but she makes more cookies now." The next day, she invited me to ride with her to the store. "We can stock up for the weekend. Evan wants to bake." I hesitated for a second, then agreed. The ride was smooth. Her new car was flashier, but emptier somehow. No conversation, just GPS directions and ambient music playing softly between us. In the baking aisle, she asked, "Do you think I'm a bad person?" The question came out of nowhere. I paused. "I think you're used to being in control." She exhaled through her nose. "That's not a no." I shrugged. "It's not a yes either." Back home, she unloaded the groceries without a word. But I noticed she placed the eggs carefully, like she understood some things are fragile, even when they don't look it. That evening, she came to my room, knocked once, held out a small envelope, from the insurance company. "Your name's on the registration now." I took it. "Thank you," she nodded. "You could have just asked for help, you know." I looked at her. "So could you." Her face tightened. She turned and walked away. But the next morning, there was a sticky note on the fridge. In her handwriting, "Leftovers are yours. Evan asked for your mashed potatoes tonight. You win." No signature. Just a quiet admission with 3 words she probably hated to write. A week passed. No more remarks about cars. No more jabs about being modern or downsizing for simplicity. Just space. Unspoken recalibration. Samantha didn't apologize. Not with words. But the tension she once wore like perfume had begun to fade. We didn't become close, not overnight. But we became possible. Then came Sunday morning. Evan knocked on my door at 7:03 a.m., still in his pajamas, holding something behind his back. "Mom says you have to drive me today." He grinned. "She's making pancakes and burning them." I laughed. "Where are we going?" He pulled out a folded piece of paper, his school art project. "To the park. I need leaves." We took the car. My car. He buckled himself in all business. "Can I put my music on only, if it's not screaming?" He played something soft. And as we drove, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Belonging. Not permission. Not borrowed time. But presence. Later, when I parked in the driveway, I opened the glove box to pull out a tissue. And found it. An envelope. Unsealed. My name on the front, in Samantha's handwriting. Inside was a photo. The one from the dealership, the copy I'd thought she took with her. But this one had something written on the back, in ink, Neat. Intentional. You didn't take the car. You took back your place. I see that now. No signature, no flourish. Just that. I closed the glove box. Sat there a long time. Sometimes the words you wait years to hear don't need to be spoken out loud. They just need to be meant. That night, I made mashed potatoes. From scratch. Just the way Evan liked them. Samantha walked into the kitchen, tied her hair back, and said, "I'll do the dishes." And for the first time, I didn't feel like a guest. I felt like someone who had always been there. Someone who was finally seen. Have you ever been made to feel small? Until you stood your ground, the quiet way. Have you ever bought back your place without raising your voice? Share your story in the comments. Because sometimes dignity doesn't need volume.